I thought the story of Expedition 33 was underwhelming. What exactly was going on near the end of the game? Did that affect your feelings about the writing or the characters at all? There is the issue of AI-generated art in the game.
Today's video is a conversation between myself and Infomercial. Info writes about video games and their connections to real-world history, literature, and philosophy. He published a video last year detailing his thoughts about Clair Obscur's story, specifically about how it didn't quite land for him, so I reached out asking if he'd like to chat more about his thoughts on the game. We're going to discuss every single facet of Clair Obscur, so please enjoy. Okay, so let's start with the gameplay. How did you feel about that, bro?
Expedition 33 is clearly inspired by Japanese RPGs like Final Fantasy, Suikoden, to some extent games like Paper Mario as well. But the combination of turn-based gameplay with the dodge, parry, quick-time mechanics kind of left me feeling like I wish they would have picked one or the other. I've been playing a bunch of Baldur's Gate 3 recently, and I know it's an entirely different genre, but I have been struck by how in that game, just the total dedication to turn-based gameplay gives you so much freedom and flexibility to build out your character and your team. Each fight in that game could go, any number of different ways, and it's almost like a conversation between you and your opponent, and there are typically a number of different answers that you could have for their positioning and their attacks and things like that. In Expedition 33, there's basically one right answer, and that is to parry. And the game feels totally busted in terms of difficulty and progression if you can just get the parry timing right. And there's so many weapons and skills that synergize with parrying that it kind of feels like you're playing the game wrong if you try and deal with encounters in a different way. It sort of falls into a weird spot where the fights aren't really that tactically challenging, aside from like a few edge cases, but a lot of them are kind of like a test of endurance, like how many times in a row can you hit parry? And you could say that about a game like Sekiro too, but the total commitment to the real-time action gameplay in Sekiro means that at least for me, the mechanic felt a little more like it was supposed to be there. But it was still a really interesting experiment. How can we add, timing-based reactions to a turn-based game?
Okay, so I actually agree wholeheartedly with you on this point. I think for me, my grievance with the gameplay is more so connected to the complete mismanagement of the difficulty curve. While I do want to recognize that this might not be something most players encounter or casual players wouldn't necessarily grapple with, for me, it kind of stuck out like a sore thumb throughout my time in Lumiere, and it began in earnest at Frozen Hearts. For those of you who don't know, immediately after meeting Minoko, you can do a side quest for the Grandees where you retrieve a special item for them in Frozen Hearts. While the casual players may ignore this or decide not to partake once they step in and see the enemies are high level, I think most veterans will hear an opportunity for a side quest and jump on it. And then most veterans will take that first fight, struggle through it, but then see the massive XP and think to themselves, here's my chance. And then grind through the area, reveling at the thrill of stacking levels that will allow them to smite their foes. The issue with this is that there is simply way too much power to be gained in Frozen Hearts. It completely skewed the rest of my playthrough because of the power scaling bump I received there and my general RPG and optimization savvy that comes from just being in a genre for a while. My raw stats and Picto's utilization and knowledge of the skills, it led to me being unstoppable. To share a quick anecdote, that iconic theme that plays during Renoir's boss fight in the Monolith? When I entered the discourse post-game and saw people talking about that song, I was literally thinking to myself, like, when does this even play in the game? Because I was 1 and 2 turning story bosses after Frozen Hearts. I was completely disconnected from the joy and thrill of what were meant to be gameplay climaxes. I didn't even see with my own eyes the movesets that the devs must have poured so much love into because of a mismanagement of the difficulty curve. But anyways, the next thing I want to discuss are the RPG elements in this game. Thoughts?
I think that Expedition 33 has similar issues with its RPG systems as it does with its combat, in that it tries a bunch of different things out, but it doesn't quite commit to any of them enough to really stick the landing. The Lumina and Picto's system, for instance, I think is a really clever idea that feels interesting at first, but oh my god, the UI in this game, I think really needed a second pass. I don't think that I've ever played an RPG that had menus as clunky as Expedition 33. And maybe that just speaks to like my lack of experience with RPGs. I'm sure there's some deep stuff in a back catalog somewhere that has truly, atrocious menus. But man, I just, again, this is a situation where it got to the point where I sort of just gave up customizing my team and their skills and their weapons because it felt so bad to rummage around in the menus trying to set up different builds. And this would be another point of comparison to something like Baldur's Gate 3, which is a game that is more complex than Expedition 33, but I would argue has a smoother experience when it comes to building characters and customizing your party. I really like tinkering with my builds in Baldur's Gate 3, and sometimes I will spend an hour just kind of moving things around and respecking characters and looking at all the options, and that's never something that I wanted to do in Expedition 33. There are also some things that I feel like are just kind of poorly explained. I really tried to understand CL's character and the darkness and light stacks thing that she had going on, but it just felt kind of confusing at the end of the day. And not to mention that I hardly ever had to worry about what most of my team was doing because of the Mael nuke problem. And that's a build that got a lot of coverage after the game released because of how strong it was and how it sort of trivialized certain tough encounters. And it's hard for me to criticize this because I did use the build and it was my own choice, but that was just because all the other options felt so sluggish and unoptimized compared to turning Mael just into an ICBM and pointing her at the enemy. And it's hard because, I'm not going to pretend like I know how to balance a game, but when so many people are using the same build to get through a game, I do feel like that's a sign that something is off design-wise.
Okay, so I've heard the UI complaint, and honestly, I think I'm one of those people where I'm in the minority where I just didn't mind it as much as I played. It definitely did take a few hours of game time, don't get me wrong, for me to kind of create the neural pathways that would actually remember where stuff is and what it does, but I didn't have a lot of personal issue with the Pictos and Lumina system. I feel like I understood the BG3 comp in the gameplay section we just did, but I'm not sure if it makes a ton of sense for us to do here. For me, that's a little bit like saying Mass Effect did companion relationships better than Skyrim, right? Like, yes, but also these games are going after fundamentally different things, even though they are RPGs, right? That D&D insanely deep character building gameplay loop just isn't really comparable for me to what Clair Obscur aims to be as a game, in my opinion. As for the CL thing, I feel like that's a situation where it's almost like damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? Because there are just as many players who yearn for deep, complex characters in terms of their skills in combat who could have been disappointed if CL was as simple as Lune, for example. I'm not sure I can fault Expedition 33 for trying and succeeding, in my opinion, with making a super diverse cast of characters in terms of combat. As for the Mael nuke thing, okay, so I do hear you on that, but I also want to give Sandfall credit because they did nerf her pretty immediately, and in reality, every single character on the cast can become extremely broken. Mael was just the most simple or rudimentary to execute in the early days, and kind of still is. I do kind of feel like we should acknowledge the context that nobody has to or needs to use the Mael nuke build. You can still express yourself in a variety of ways in the main content. I don't want to take for granted the fact that every character is viable. The only time you need to have a build, so to speak, is for the Simon Superboss, and to be fair, only 15.6% of players to this day have defeated Simon per Steam. So I think that the Mael nuke thing, in spite of its infamy, it wasn't actually something I would consider a negative on this game, given how situational it was. So for me, I'm just in the camp that it's the power scaling that's an issue, along with all of the other things you mentioned in the first gameplay section. I'm quite okay with all of the RPG elements, to be honest.
Yeah, it's always tricky comparing games in different genres, for sure. I mean, maybe a better comparison would be something like Persona. Those are games that have a lot of complex options and team building, but the devs have always done a really good job making sure that the UI is smooth and it's fun to use. And so I'm definitely interested to see if that is something that Sandfall puts resources towards in the future, or maybe it was just a me problem. You know, I tend to be kind of picky about menus and things like that.
For sure. So I actually think that comparison makes more sense. For me, Persona is best in class when it comes to UI, and there's a considerable difference between that and Clair Obscur. I don't think it's a you problem, bro. I've seen too many people make a similar claim, to be fair, and Sandfall themselves have done quality of life updates to the UI since release, so I think you're valid for sure. I just vibe with it personally, and I wonder if others have too. Guys, definitely comment how you feel about this when you see this. I'm curious to know. But next, let's get into the fun part and talk about the narrative. How'd you feel about that, bro?
So I made a video last year about why I thought the story of Expedition 33 was underwhelming, and I can briefly recap that here because I have some additional thoughts now that I've had time to kind of let it marinate a little bit. And my main point in that video was that Expedition 33 didn't exactly land for me story-wise because it felt like a story that I had seen before. And it was one that felt kind of common in like modern story-focused RPGs. There was an article on IGN that kind of ruffled some feathers. It was by Simon Carty. It was called, "I'm Getting Bored of Every PlayStation Game Telling the Same Story." And his point was that Ghost of Yotei, beautiful game, absolutely clearly made with love and passion, but it doesn't break any new ground in the story department. It is a story about grief and revenge, like The Last of Us 2, like 2018's God of War, like 2022's God of War, or Returnal in 2020, Death Stranding 2 in 2025 in some ways. Specifically, he was saying these games were about a sort of like parental grief and anguish, the pain of raising kids, losing spouses, losing family members, things like that. And people got mad at this article, but I agree with a lot of it, and I think it's an indication of a couple of things. Number one is that games are growing up as an artistic medium, which is a really good thing. I firmly believe in video games as an art form. I think they are capable of moving people in ways that are just as powerful as like film or literature or fine art or anything like that. But number two, there are definitely some growing pains that I think a lot of games are going through at the moment. And it seems like in the past 10 years or so, a lot of game developers have been kind of reaching for the same themes, the same archetypes, the same sorts of stories as an indicator that like we are making something mature and serious and thoughtful. Expedition 33's story kind of treads familiar ground. I think at the end of the day, that's why it didn't land as well for me as maybe it did for other people, because I felt like I had seen this story before. You know, how people use art and expression to cope in healthy or unhealthy ways with loss and tragedy, how a drive for revenge can hurt the people that you love and leave you unfulfilled. It's not the worst story in the world, you know, but I would have appreciated seeing it kind of go in like a different direction.
Okay, so I certainly hear you on this for sure. I think for me, though, a huge reason this game had such a resonant impact was its capability to force you to reflect. I actually interviewed the writer of the game, and in our conversation, one of the things that we spoke about was the idea that this story and your reactions to the storyline and your eventual decision at the end is almost like a mirror, right? So the totality of who you are and what your experiences in life have been will ultimately inform and shape the decision that you make at the end of the game in terms of not only which ending you select, but what your reasonings are for selecting said ending. I think this game is unique in the sense that it makes the story feel extremely personal to you in spite of the fact that you don't actually have a self-insert in it. I'm not sure I can recall a game with split endings where there was so much variance for the reasons that people chose the different endings, right? So, for example, I've seen a lot of people go, I'm a dad, so I picked Verso's ending. At the same time, I've seen people go, I'm a dad, so I picked Mael's ending. Just to give an example of what I'm trying to articulate, it's been utterly fascinating to see people bring life experiences to the table and then have completely different takes based upon them. Or, you know, I've seen people go, you know, given my experience being disabled, I went with Mael's ending. At the same time, I've seen people say, given my experience being disabled, I went with Verso's ending, right? So I think this story excels as a vehicle for reflection, and this is what separates it for me from all of those other games that you had mentioned. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
I think that's a really important point, that everybody brings their own experiences to art. And your life experiences can have a huge effect on what sort of art resonates with you or not. I made a video last year about Persona 5, and part of it was discussing how the first time that I tried that game, I really didn't vibe with it at all. But I gave it another chance in my 30s. This was just last year when I played it. And all of a sudden, the theme of making something out of your life and leaning on others for support, it felt way more impactful. I'm a firm believer that like you have to meet a work of art at the right time in your life for it to really land.
It's actually super fascinating. I did Persona 5 in my early 20s and always wondered if it would have had the same impact if I was a bit farther away from the high school experience. I would definitely join you on your point about meeting a work of art at the right time and place in life, by the way. I think that's a really awesome take that I don't think people give enough credence to, and you stated it really well there, but I digress. We can't cover the narrative without discussing the characters, so how did you feel about them?
I thought the voice actors all did a phenomenal job with the scripts that they were given. For any faults that I have with the story, I did feel connected to the characters and I liked watching them interact with each other. Jennifer English especially deserves all of the praise, all of the awards she got for voicing Mael. Her work carried a lot of weight in getting me to engage with a story that I wasn't exactly on board with. Charlie Cox, awesome as Gustav. I mean, whoever was in charge of the VO department deserves a lot of praise. I think it would have been pretty easy to just dump a bunch of stars into the game, but I get the feeling that they were pretty intentional with who they picked, and all of the actors felt like they had pretty good chemistry with each other.
Yeah, that's valid for sure, for sure. But give me some more here, bro. Like, what do you think about the characters from a literary point of view? Did you like them or dislike them or hate them or love them? Like, any standouts or misses for you across the cast?
This is kind of getting into spoiler territory, but I thought that Gustav's death was done really, really well. That was the one emotional beat that really stood out for me, because even though I could sort of see it coming, he was such a warm presence, he was such a friendly presence in that game, that having him ripped away really ratcheted up the stakes and gave the party something more immediate to fight for. But I will say this, at the end of the game, learning that Gustav wasn't real, I mean, quote unquote, I guess it's kind of up for debate, but that's the impression that I took away from it, and it kind of took the wind out of my sails a little. But I am curious to know what you thought about the characters, especially with the reveal of what exactly was going on near the end of the game. Did that affect your feelings about the writing or the characters at all?
Yeah, so for me, I feel like the feelings you were talking about were pretty intentional when it comes to the writing. I think the player base was meant to be fractured and challenged when it comes to deciding for yourself what is real and isn't real. In terms of the structure of this game and the different acts, I think that the sort of whiplash from the canvas reveal and the subsequent hyper focus on the Desandra family drama, that was intentional. The writing was trying to challenge what Act 1 worked so hard to convince you to believe. That the Lumerians and their struggle deserved empathy and support above all else. Lumiere must be free and finally allowed to live. So the structure of the game and the reveal that they went for, it didn't bother me that much, and I say this as someone who is heavily pro-Lumiere and who fully believes the Lumerians are just as real as you or me. Now, with that said, I do want to celebrate the characters. I think that in a medium like video games that hasn't historically done awesome in terms of writing women, they literally did not miss across the whole cast. I like that no character was a simple archetype. They were all Clair Obscur, or in possessing of contrasts and contradictions, just like we are as humans. I think Verso is one of the best written video game characters in history, and I think Mael isn't that far behind. It's rare, in my opinion, to come across a piece of fiction where literally every character served a genuine narrative function and added value to the story and world building. I don't know. Do you think I'm crazy for feeling that way?
I think you have an especially good point about the women in the game being well written. At the very least, I mean, they did a good job avoiding tropes, and that is always nice to see.
Facts. So let's kind of land this thing on graphics and art direction. The floor is yours, fam.
One thing Expedition 33 definitely has going for it is a distinct artistic vision. I love the character designs, the art direction, the environmental design. All of that felt fresh and new, and I really did appreciate that. However, there is the issue of AI-generated art in the game. And to be fair, this was one case that was very quickly removed after it was discovered, and the developers said that it was just placeholder art that they missed before release. But for me, it's still disappointing to kind of see that be part of a developer's pipeline. And I understand that most developers nowadays use generative AI to some degree or another. So maybe this is just me and my sort of grumpy old man moment. I really don't like generative AI. It does leave a bad taste in my mouth. I don't like to see it in pre-production, concept art, anything like that. I mean, it might be a losing battle, but I'm going to keep saying it anyways, I guess.
Okay, so I hear you. I really do, like genuinely. But I do want to contextualize that a bit more, just so folks who haven't heard about this can draw their own conclusions. The account that Sandfall gave is that when AI tools first became available in 2022, some members of the team briefly experimented with them to generate temporary placeholder textures. Upon release, instances of placeholder textures were removed within 5 days to be replaced with the correct textures that were always intended for release, but were missed during the quality assurance process. So to be more specific, I'm pretty sure that the assets in question were literally just newspaper clippings on a lamppost. So for me, I actually don't have any issue with this, and I'm extremely anti-AI myself, but I'm just trying to consider how different the landscape was in 2022. Remember, like when AI first burst onto the scene, it was not something that was received with the same ire that it does currently. I think almost everyone has briefly tried AI at some point, and I don't hold that against everyone. Granted, if you actively use AI in 2026 on creative projects, yeah, that's a different story. But for me, I think about Sandfall's usage of AI like this, right? Let me outline two scenarios. In scenario A, let's say a chef, why can I say that? A chef at a restaurant cooks a steak. So let's say they even go so far as raising the animal it came from and butchering the animal when the time comes. However, they use store-bought salt to season the meat instead of making their own. Would they then be lambasted for not making salt in-house to accompany their meat? They're not. Now, what about this? In scenario B, if a food truck owner went to a restaurant, ordered a meal, and then took the meal to go, and then went back to their food truck and sold that meat as something that they made, would they be lambasted for that? Absolutely. For me, the scenario around Clair Obscur is way more akin to scenario A. Additionally, I do want to add that I honestly don't think that this is something that higher ups at Sandfall genuinely would have been aware of. This honestly feels like something that maybe one person did while they were working, rather than like a decision that is holistically made by the entire team where they sat down and they were like, hey, let's use AI for this newspaper that's on this one lamppost right here. I don't know. I'd be interested to know if that changes your feelings at all, though.
I think that's some good context to keep in mind. I mean, this is an issue that the whole industry is struggling with. You've got, industry titans like Games Workshop issuing a total AI art ban across their whole company. You've got studios like Larian. I mean, the recent kind of, dumpster fire that they got caught up in. All of these debates about how much they use it, if it really helps productivity or not. I mean, I will say that Sandfall don't seem like lazy people to me. It doesn't seem like they're just cutting corners with AI and like rushing out a half-assed product. That would definitely be the bigger concern to me.
100%. And I appreciate you hearing me out on that, bro, like for sure. And I do want to reiterate that I do hear you, and I'm completely aligned that the best use of AI is zero AI when it comes to creative endeavors. Hopefully Sandfall learns from this incident. I mean, I'd be shocked if they didn't, but I also want to say while we're in this section that one of the most stunning and striking things about this game was absolutely the sheer amount of variety in terms of the different areas and environments. They're also distinctly striking and beautiful in unique ways. And while this is certainly an RPG, so enemies are reused and repurposed, I felt that this was one of the strongest RPGs I've played in terms of enemy variety. Guys, please let us know in the comments how you feel about things. These types of videos are always a million times better when you chime in and join the conversation. Before I log off, I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. I'll always be infinitely grateful to each one of you for choosing to spend time here on the channel. And I thank you for doing so well with being kind and respectful as you engage with each other and myself. A huge thank you to Infomercial for stopping by for a chat. I can't recommend his channel enough. He does great work. If you want to actively have discussions like this with other like-minded gamers, then definitely check out the link in the description to join my Discord. You can support the channel and join a cozy community that's always there for you at the same time. Check out the other videos on my channel or Info's channel for more content like this, and have a great day, night, or morning, and remember to be kind and thoughtful. Peace.
Well, you sure smell real enough.
No, I don't.